I've got a question for you hobby heroes listening and watching out there today. Have you ever wondered how to fit an entire battlefield, a proper one, on an end table? That's the question we're going to answer today in this video. Microscale wargaming, why it's awesome, and why you should get into it, assuming you're not already. I'm Chad Neighbors of thechadneighbors.com, definitely not an evil AI, and we're going to get straight into it. So, wargaming is awesome. Modeling is awesome, but why on earth would you want to mess with anything as small as the tiny people you're seeing right now on your screen? I've got several good reasons. Among them, a couple of practical ones for starters. You folks that like bigger battles, meaning lots of models moving around in big formations, small scales are where it's at. If you need to push around loads and loads of models in the course of a game, microscales greatly facilitate that kind of gameplay, saving you time and aggravation. For the same reason, microscale games streamline logistics. They are easier to both store and transport. By way of for instance, I've got a huge collection of Battletech and Steel Rift stuff, and several different flavors of terrain for use with each. Certainly, it's more than I need or could even use in a single game. Nonetheless, it all fits in a single filing cabinet I've got tucked away innocuously in the corner of a room in my house. When I need to load and go, a mini case the size of a tackle box carries pretty much everything I need, minus books and dice. And let's be real, folks, whether you call yourself a collector or not, you know our hobby has a way of multiplying and subsequently taking over your home. That's just the way it goes. I'm not judging. Still, your decor and your family doesn't have to suffer quite so much if you don't need to dedicate an entire room to storing your models and all your related paraphernalia. Another big advantage offered by microscale systems, and the very biggest for some people in these trying economic times, is that the miniatures are cheaper, often a lot cheaper. Whatever kind of material they're made from, the less that's used in manufacture typically translates directly to reduced costs for you, the consumer, unless the factory says Games Workshop on the outside. Anyway, that means you can get more variety, more forces, and a lot more fun for the same amount of hobby dollars. The cost and space considerations are also relevant for you 3D printer drivers out there. You can print more units at once in a given size print bay because they're smaller, and you'll need less resin and less filament per model. That's a win-win no matter how you square it. Last but certainly not least, microscale models are just plain charming. Sure, what is supposed to be a 12-meter tall mech that is in actuality just 2 inches on the table won't be as initially impressive as the giant 40K Titan that cost a mortgage payment, but it will give us the sense that we're seeing a scene unfold and play out from on high, from up above. The effect is a real bird's eye view that's impressive in a different way, especially if you take the time to max out the board and terrain and other set dressing for your game. Now, a side-by-side comparison here for you lovers of heavy metal mech action. The model you see here is a Duster from Enemy Spotted Studios' excellent Blackout game. Any Titanfall, RIP, gone too soon, fans out there in the audience, I know the vibe is speaking to you. Anyway, Blackout is scaled at 30 to 32 millimeters, and this big fighting boy in universe stands roughly 25 feet tall. Don't quote me on that, but it's close. Next to it is now a Battletech miniature, a Centurion, in roughly 6mm, or the new and now standard scale for Battletech, 1 to 265. Battletech scale has historically been all over the place, but this miniature is supposed to represent a machine that stands between 33 and 45 feet tall in life. Comparing the two, the Duster is a much bigger and far more impressive model, but it gobbles up a lot more room on the table. If you care more about the splendor of the individual model, there's just no comparison. Straight up, the Duster looks amazing. But when it comes to actually playing the game, though, it's so much easier to move a game piece around when it's just a couple of inches tall. Does that make sense? I hope so. Something else, the price to consider. As mentioned, that Duster is resin and retails for about 60 bucks. The Centurion is PVC plastic and sells for about $8 to $10 individually when you can find a single. Now, let's say you're to start filling up a board playing area that's 2, 3, or 4 feet square. with either of those models. You'll start running out of physical space and practical room to maneuver a lot quicker with those bigger models. Look at the base, it's a lot bigger. The overall volume of the model, the space it eats up, is just more. For this reason, in my experience, smaller scale war games tend to be more tactically rich and satisfying, regardless of era. Model heavy games in larger scales turn into something more resembling a head on rank and file clash rather than a contest of maneuver. There's just no room to hit and fade, and terrain makes less of a difference. Positioning, flat out, is not as important. But as ever, if you've got some other system like that, you love that style of gameplay, by all means be my guest. Don't listen to me, not trying to yuck your yum, as it were. If everything I've said, though, makes sense and sounds good to you so far, quench your hankering for some tiny sci-fi action with games like BattleTech, Steel Rift by Death Ray Designs. Awesome game system, does not get enough attention. Hard War by Modiphius, Full Spectrum Dominance by The Lazy Forger. That latter game is actually scale flexible, but it's advertised as working well with anything from 3 mil all the way up to 15 millimeter. Oh, of course, don't forget Adeptus Titanicus from Games Workshop, if you hate money. Still a lot cheaper than mainline 40K, though. Adeptus Titanicus is scaled right at 8 millimeter, I believe, just a smidge bigger than Epic, which is 6 millimeter scale. If historical or modern warfare is more your thing, GHQ has Micro Armor available in both modern and World War II flavors. Both are solid choices. GHQ themselves make some supremely detailed metal models of military vehicles from all around the world, all eras and vintages, and they're quite affordable for what you get. Perfect hobby fodder for military enthusiasts and you rivet counter guys that just crave getting the details right. All the games I just mentioned now are only a few. There's a lot more out there. On that note, spin by the comments and share your favorite, either the game or the model lineup. Please remind me of any that I'm forgetting and deserve mentioning. While you're there, make sure you go on and click like, subscribe, and the notification bell so you'll get a heads up the next time I post a video. I'm gunning for one a week, and I've got lots more good stuff in the pipeline. Thanks in advance. Let's get back to it. I've got to address some common complaints and perceived shortcomings of microscale gaming and models. Tied for first on the lips of most naysayers is that the models themselves are just too small to offer any real detail, or else they are so small that they're a grade 5 pain to paint. Both of these complaints are fair, but more a matter of taste than a proper deal breaker. Regarding the level of detail, metal, resin, and plastic models in this scale still offer remarkable detail, lots of character, especially from the better manufacturers like the ones we just talked about. For military hardware, vehicles, and whatnot, the models will still average a couple of inches tall or long. If you can paint a Space Marine, you can paint that. But even if you're getting into some stuff that's truly tiny, nay, microscopic, like the rioters you've seen a few times so far in this video, or the spacesuited infantrymen from my last couple of videos, you'll be surprised at how detailed they really are. You'll have to get closer to see and appreciate that detail, but if you've got the ability and the patience, they can shine. And that's part of the fun of working at this scale in the first place. Fun for some, I should say, but not for all. Depending on the way you're wired, you'll love prepping, painting, and modifying the smallest of models, or you won't. That's just the way it is. For some, it is a nightmare. Too demanding, too exacting, not worth the trouble, the investment of time and effort. That's fine. But I'd ask you to consider that if you crave speed in getting models acceptably table ready, it won't get much faster than it will working at this scale. And that's because this scale lends itself to a different kind of painting, one that's more impressionistic, much of the time, you might say. Chunkier edge highlighting, dry brushing, stippling, talent in a bottle, shaders, washes, pigments, and all those other tricks give disproportionately good and realistic looking results on these tiny models compared to the larger ones. So remember when I said that the effect on a table that's well dressed to the scale is a lot like looking down from above, that bird's eye view? Well, in life, with distance comes a natural fuzzing of details. And we can use this to our advantage here. If you phone in the paint job on a much bigger, highly detailed model and a larger scale, it's immediately noticeable. It's jarring to the eye. And if you care about how your boys look when they're taking to the table, that may mean you feel more pressure, even obligation, to put in the time required to get that paint job to an acceptable level. Conversely, it's entirely acceptable to base coat, all over wash, and then dry brush a stand of 6mm infantry, give them a slather of basing texture, and call them good to go. They are barely bigger than a grain of rice, and no one's going to judge you for not agonizing over them. Those same techniques will still yield acceptable, even impressive results on mechs, tanks, aircraft. But if you do want to put in the time to pump up minis of this scale, they will still pop. This value proposition, for lack of a better word, when it comes to painting, will make sense and appeal to some hobbyists and not others, and that's okay. I just want you to know for now that micro scale models tend to look better or correct with far less overall effort on average compared to larger scales. And you can still take them to a show off worthy level if you want to. For new hobbyists that are up to the challenge or veterans eager to try out their hand at something new, I've got videos playing that will detail my tools, processes, tips, and tricks for pushing the envelope with 6mm infantry and a lot more. I'm not a master painter by any means, but most of my accomplished peers, whom I respect, have informed me that I do good work at this scale, and I managed to do it without any hyper-specialized equipment like brushes made from a single nose hair taken from the North American glistering marmot or some other rare and endangered creature. So if I can do it, you can, and I promise. Take a look here at some of these close-ups of the rioters. These are metal, and they're all from Microworld Games, and they aren't as detailed as a human being would be in a larger scale. But look, they've still got loads and loads of detail and fun little touches. You can make out different clothing and different textures on the clothing, weapons, haircuts, gear, more. They're just awesome. And when you see them on the table next to what is supposed to be a giant robot, a big tank, a building, man, it just sells the effect, and it does something to me. I love it. Tell you what, here's what I want to know, is how do people even manage to hand sculpt the master models for those? Like 3D modeling them is one thing, but like live in person, that's crazy to me. Anyway, subject for another video perhaps. So recap, going micro scale means you're going to save money, have more space on the table. You'll be able to do more with the table space that you do have, transport your models more easily, and according to statistics I just made up, have more fun. That's a fact, and that's a wrap. Folks, thank you so much for watching and hanging out with me today. I really appreciate it. Please let me know in the comments where the human resistance leaders are hiding, what you thought of the video, what you liked and didn't like, and what you want to see more of. I promise I'm going to keep the content coming, and I'll be buffing up my video and audio along the way. That's all I've got for you today. So remember, have character, don't be a character, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.